Thanks for clicking. The Canadian economy could see significant long-term economic damage from a prolonged trade war with the United States, even in the most optimistic of scenarios. This according to a new report coming from the Bank of Montreal. And this report came just at the right time, with Prime Minister Carney and US President Donald Trump meeting at the Oval Office on Tuesday, where the president was non-committal on what he wants to do about USMCA. And the report, sort of covered by Canadian media, looks at three scenarios in the lead up to those USMCA negotiations. One where everything stays about where it is right now, one where things get worse, and one where things get really, really bad. And I do like to cover the reports from the Bank of Montreal. As we've discussed before at great length on this channel, they're one of the smarter banks on the block, less biased than many of the other ones, and have a history of calling out nonsense on industry and media conventional wisdom.
Am I so horrible?
Yeah. So what I want to do today is go over the report from the Bank of Montreal, taking a look at the good, the bad, and the ugly scenarios outlined by the bank, and then discuss some implications. As we'll see today, there are major uncertainties with Canada's economy going forward, but we'll get at least a bit more information on how the economy is doing on Friday when Canada's unemployment data gets released from Stats Canada, and we will have an update out on that data on this channel. Make sure you click like and subscribe if you want to get those updates, but for now, let's get into this report. Onto this report coming from BMO. We'll start off with the least bad scenario, under which BMO says Canada just kind of muddles through. Under this scenario, free trade continues to endure, and neither the United States nor Canada imposes any additional tariffs over and above what we have at this moment, aside from those already in place on steel, aluminum, lumber, etc. Under this scenario, business investment would lag. Which, it already is. We just saw a report from the Business Council warning about an investment crisis just last week. The report says that exports would continue to slide, which, again, yes, we just got a report noting that Canada's trade deficit is widening with exports shrinking. And finally, as a result of those, Canada's unemployment rate would rise to 7.3%, currently sitting at 7.1%. So, under this scenario, as outlined by BMO, we're pretty much through the worst of it. Unemployment would rise back to about where it was in 2016, but would not reach back to 2009 levels. Nothing really overly severe. The Bank of Canada would be cutting rates by another 50 basis points by early 2026, which obviously doesn't signify a great economy, but not as bad as it could be.
Now is the time.
But the second scenario, which BMO calls no special treatment, gets a bit more severe, assuming that Trump imposes even more tariffs on Canada, bringing the tariff rate up from 7% all the way to 15%. Now, this scenario assumes that the US withdraws altogether from the USMCA, completely ignores it, or imposes the tariffs as part of a broader framework, all of which, as we've seen, are not out of the realm of possibility. In fact, Trump was asked about USMCA at his meeting with Carney on Tuesday and did not count out the establishment of something new.
Well, we could renegotiate it, and that would be good, or we could just do different deals. We're allowed to do different deals if we want. We might make deals that are better for the individual.
Under this scenario, Canada retaliates with a 5% tariff of its own, but keeps it at that, fearful of further US retaliation. And while we might expect under this scenario for the Bank of Canada to be cutting rates even further, BMO says not so much, as the bank is going to be wary of long-term price increases stemming from those retaliatory tariffs, and would therefore likely keep the policy rate still around that 2% range. Now, while on this point, BMO assumes that a 5% retaliatory tariff will be enough to stop the Bank of Canada from cutting rates further. With that said, I'm not sure that we'd see that 5% retaliatory tariff in the first place. Prime Minister Carney quietly dropped the previous retaliatory tariffs for a reason. He's playing one of Robert Putnam's two-level games, trying to avoid the ire of the domestic population while placating a foreign leader. Or vice versa, it works just the same.
I know his language. I'm talking with him.
And he got a rate cut out of doing so, with even the Bank of Canada noting that the removal of those counter tariffs meant it was much less worried about price increases when it cut rates. As such, is the Prime Minister going to impose further tariffs in a battle he can't win? Or is he going to leave it, as he has, and hope that the Bank of Canada can do enough to help mitigate the downside effects? I'm just not sure he goes with the former the way BMO is predicting, but who knows? History says no, but we'll see what happens.
Well, I'll tell you.
And for the third scenario, we have continental divide, including a 35% across the board tariff as USMCA negotiations go off the rails, with Canada retaliating at 15%. Under this scenario, we certainly do see a recession, and unemployment would rise by 1 to 1.5%, which would in fact bring unemployment back to post-GFC levels. Under this scenario, the policy rate does get cut, probably down to about 1%, but still not heading down to zero.
Now is the time.
So those are the three scenarios. Things kind of muddle through the way they are, things get marginally worse than they are now, or they get very bad. All very much based on what happens with USMCA negotiations in 2026. Now, I'm not sure that any of these three scenarios are going to play out in the manner in which BMO expects. In addition to, I think, placing far too much emphasis on the willingness of Canadian leaders to fight the United States, not a value judgment, just looking at history, there are also intervening variables which are going to complicate the process. First up, the mortgage renewal wave, which even the Bank of Montreal noted in another report, will see 1.8 million mortgages renew over the next 12 months, with 1/4 of those set to see payment increases by 20% or more. That's an awful lot of money getting sucked out of the economy in 1 year's time. I'm not so sure the unemployment rate is limited to 7.3%, even if everything stays okay with the United States. Second, as mentioned, but I want to go into a bit more detail, the paper places a lot of emphasis on Canada's willingness to fight the United States, to retaliate with countermeasures, in some cases by a lot of countermeasures, which the paper even admits would only slow U.S. economic growth marginally. Further, those counter tariffs, as we saw with the bank's most immediate cut, would further limit the Bank of Canada's ability to mitigate the renewal wave. So Canada has some pre-existing problems, the mortgage renewal wave that the United States really doesn't have due to the nature of its bond market. As such, the bank, the government, is somewhat limited in its ability to win this fight, even if the US wasn't 10 times bigger in the global hegemon.
Does that matter?
So, of course, this report isn't perfect, but it does provide us a lens through which we can look at the future, and demonstrates, I think quite rightly, that the focus needs to be on those USMCA negotiations unfolding in 2026. My guess is we will continue to muddle through the rest of 2025, but those negotiations will dominate the headlines in 2026. If history has been any guide, either through his first term or for the first 9 months of this term, the president is not going to negotiate quietly, creating an awful lot of uncertainty here north of the border. The uncertainty alone, I think, will be enough to put downward pressure on economic development, and that's with us just muddling through. It's anyone's guess what happens next. With that said, we will obviously continue to track how this does all play out on this channel. Make sure you click like and subscribe if you want to get those updates, but for now, thanks so much for watching.